You are watching a hero's dignity being stripped away in real time without realizing whose life is about to collapse forever. Commander Darius Whitaker stood beneath the flickering fluorescent lights of a rundown gas station with both hands raised. The metals across his chest gleamed while he stared into the barrel of a trembling Glock 19 held by a small-town officer carrying a personal grudge. Darius had hunted terrorists through the mountains of Afghanistan. He had survived the freezing depths of the North Atlantic. Now, a local officer believed he was a fraud. They thought he was another drifter wearing a costume. They had no idea that the man they were placing in handcuffs was one of the Pentagon's most valuable assets. They certainly did not understand that this arrest would trigger a chain reaction that would destroy an entire police department and end with a prison sentence lasting most of a lifetime. This was not merely a story about an arrest. It was the story of what happened when the wrong officer targeted the wrong hero. The Georgia heat pressed against the asphalt along the Interstate 95 corridor like a physical weight. Humidity clung to the skin, and the air shimmered above the hood of every passing vehicle. Commander Darius Whitaker did not mind. He had survived the suffocating jungles of Colombia and the scorching sands of Anbar province. Compared with those environments, the heavy warmth of the American South felt almost comforting. Darius guided his polished black Ford F-150 from the highway and followed the exit toward Oak Creek, a small Georgia town that most travelers could pass without noticing. The truck rumbled deeply as he slowed. He glanced into the rearview mirror. He wore his service dress blues, the high collar rested stiffly against his neck, and every line of the uniform had been pressed to perfection. Darius rarely wore it outside official duties, but that day had been different. He had just returned from Arlington after burying a brother in arms. Darius had once pulled the man from a burning Humvee, only to lose him much later to cancer. The grief remained inside his chest like a dull ache behind his ribs, but his face revealed nothing beyond disciplined calm. He needed fuel for the truck. He also needed food. The drive back to Jacksonville was long, and he had not eaten for quite some time. Darius entered Rusty's Stop and Shop, a gas station that appeared untouched by renovation. The pumps were old, their analog numbers turning lazily. Rust had gathered along the edges of the overhead canopy, and brown water stains marked the concrete below. Darius turned off the engine. His polished dress shoes crunched against the grit when he stepped from the truck. He was an imposing figure, standing 6 feet 4 inches tall, and built like a linebacker carved from granite. His skin was deep mahogany, and the decorations across the left side of his uniform caught the fading sunlight. The silver star, the bronze star with the Valor device, the purple heart, the unmistakable trident insignia of the United States Navy SEALs. To anyone who understood military decorations, Commander Darius Whitaker was a living legend. To certain people in Oak Creek, he looked like something else. Darius filled the fuel tank with precise, economical movements. His eyes continued scanning the surroundings, an instinct he could no longer turn off even when he wanted to. 2 vehicles were parked near the air pump, a Chevrolet Silverado bearing a "Don't Tread on Me" sticker and a battered Honda Civic. The station was quiet, almost too quiet. Darius returned the nozzle and walked toward the convenience store entrance. A bell sounded when he opened the glass door. Cold air blasted from the air conditioning system, sharply contrasting with the humidity outside. Behind the counter sat a teenage employee with acne scars and a look of permanent boredom. He scrolled aimlessly through his phone. Near the coffee machine stood a man wearing a tan police uniform. Officer Bryce Talbot was having a difficult period in his life. His wife had recently given him divorce papers. His supervisor had reprimanded him over a missing report. Now he was patrolling a town where almost nothing happened. Bryce had begun gaining weight around his waist, and his hairline was retreating beneath the campaign hat he used to hide it. He held a cup of lukewarm coffee and narrowed his eyes when the entrance bell sounded. Bryce watched Darius walk inside. He did not recognize the commander's rank insignia. He did not understand the trident. He saw only a large black man wearing an elaborate uniform and walking into his town's gas station with an authority Bryce believed should have belonged to him. His jaw tightened. Bryce had watched online videos exposing people who falsely wore military uniforms to receive discounts or attention. He told himself that stolen valor disgusted him because it dishonored the American flag. But something deeper was operating beneath that explanation. It was the way Darius walked. His head remained high. His shoulders stayed straight. He carried a natural authority Bryce had always wanted but had never truly possessed. Darius nodded politely as he passed the officer. "Evening, officer." Bryce did not respond. He followed Darius with his eyes and placed his coffee on the counter with unnecessary force. Liquid spilled over the rim. Darius immediately sensed the hostility. It created a prickling sensation behind his neck, the same instinct that had saved his life repeatedly during overseas operations. Ignore it, he told himself. Get a drink, buy some jerky, and return to the road. He picked up a blue sports drink and a bag of spicy beef jerky, then approached the register. That is a nice costume. Bryce's voice cut through the hum of the refrigerators. The tone was nasal and openly mocking. Darius stopped with one hand halfway toward his wallet. He turned slowly, his expression unreadable. Excuse me? Bryce pushed himself away from the counter. His hand rested casually, far too casually, near the grip of his service weapon. He swaggered toward Darius and closed the distance, attempting to use his physical presence as intimidation. The top of Bryce's head barely reached Darius's chin. I said that is a nice costume, Bryce repeated more loudly, making certain the frightened teenager behind the counter could hear him. Halloween is not here yet, buddy. Darius sighed internally. He did not have the energy for this confrontation. This is a United States Navy service dress uniform, officer. I am a commander, and I am passing through town. Bryce released a short, barking laugh. A commander? Look at you. You have far too many decorations on your chest. He pointed a thick finger toward the medals. A silver star? Seriously, where did you buy it? Online? A military surplus store? I earned it in the Karangal Valley, Darius answered. His voice became lower and dangerously calm. Officer, I do not want trouble. I am going to pay for these items and leave. You are not going anywhere, Bryce snapped. He stepped in front of Darius and blocked the path to the entrance. I am detaining you on suspicion of impersonating a military officer. Stolen valor is a federal crime. Darius stared at him. The absurdity might have been humorous under different circumstances, but the expression in Bryce's eyes made the situation dangerous. This was not about enforcing the law. It was about power. Bryce needed to win. He needed to humiliate someone else so that he could feel important again. Officer, Darius said slowly, keeping his hands clearly visible and away from his waist. My wallet is inside my rear pocket. It contains my military identification. Allow me to retrieve it, and this misunderstanding will be resolved immediately. I am sure you have a fake identification card to match the fake uniform, Bryce sneered. Turn around and place your hands behind your head. You are making a mistake, Darius warned. A very expensive mistake. Are you threatening me, boy? Bryce's face became red. He released the retention strap on his holster. I ordered you to put your hands behind your head. Do it now, or I will use my taser. The teenager behind the counter dropped his phone. Officer Talbot, maybe you should check his identification. Be quiet, Eli, Bryce shouted without looking back. Darius calculated his options. He could disarm Bryce almost instantly. A wrist lock, pressure against the elbow, and the officer would be on the floor before he could draw his weapon. But Darius was not confronting an enemy combatant. He was a commissioned officer facing a local police officer. Assaulting Bryce, even in response to corruption, could destroy Darius's career and provide the department with the excuse it needed to bury the truth. He had to follow the law even while Bryce was tearing the law apart. Darius slowly raised his hands and interlocked his fingers behind his head. Good, Bryce grunted. He moved behind Darius and kicked his feet farther apart. Spread them wider. Bryce searched him aggressively. The purpose was not simply to locate weapons. He wanted to provoke a reaction. He found the wallet and pulled it from Darius's pocket. Without examining it, Bryce threw it onto the dirty floor. You dropped my identification, Darius said. It is fake. Bryce seized Darius's wrists and locked the handcuffs around them with excessive force. The metal bit deeply against the bone. People like you make me sick, Bryce said. Real men died wearing that uniform, and you think you can put it on to look important. I am asking you to examine the identification on the floor, Darius replied, wincing slightly as Bryce forced his arms upward. Check the common access card. Verify the Department of Defense number. I will verify whatever I choose at the station. Bryce shoved him toward the door. Move! The humid air struck them again outside. Bryce forced Darius toward the black and white Dodge Charger parked carelessly near the entrance. He pushed him against the hood. Heat from the engine radiated through Darius's uniform trousers. You have the right to remain silent, Bryce recited with bored indifference. Anything you say may be used against you. Darius rested his forehead against the hot metal and closed his eyes. He took a deep breath. He thought about the telephone call he would have to make. He thought about Admiral Alton Mercer, the man who had once pinned the seal trident upon his uniform. Officer Talbot, Darius said, interrupting the warning. I am an active duty naval officer. Contact your watch commander immediately. Transporting me without verifying my identity will constitute unlawful detention and a violation of my civil rights. Bryce hesitated. For a moment, uncertainty crossed his face. Darius sounded educated, official. But Bryce looked again at the number of medals, and prejudice reclaimed control of his judgment. It seemed impossible to him. No one could have earned so many decorations. The uniform had to be false. A Navy SEAL? Bryce scoffed. Of course, get inside the vehicle. He opened the rear door and pushed Darius into the cramped, hard plastic seat. The door slammed shut, trapping him inside air that smelled of old vomit and artificial pine. Through the window, Darius watched Bryce return to the gas station and retrieve the wallet. Bryce did not open it. He pushed it into his pocket and smiled. He entered the driver's seat and activated the radio. Dispatch 4 Alpha 20, I have one male subject in custody at Rusty's Stop and Shop for impersonating military personnel, resisting arrest, and disorderly conduct. Dispatch acknowledged him. Darius leaned against the seat while his wrists throbbed. Resisting arrest? Disorderly conduct. The fabricated charges continued accumulating. Bryce reversed rapidly, allowing the tires to screech for no reason. Darius looked through the partition and met Bryce's eyes in the rearview mirror. You have ended your career, Darius whispered into the empty back seat. The cruiser sped toward the station, throwing dust behind it. Back inside the gas station, Eli Parker trembled as he picked up his phone. He had been broadcasting the confrontation live from the moment Bryce began shouting. You all are not going to believe what happened, Eli whispered to his viewers. Officer Talbot just arrested a Navy SEAL. This is going to become serious. Only a few people were watching at first. Then the audience began growing. By the time the cruiser reached the Oak Creek Police Department, someone had shared the video with an online group dedicated to identifying stolen valor. But the comments were not what Eli expected. That is not stolen valor. That is, Commander Whitaker. I served with him. What is that officer doing? The storm was no longer approaching. It had already arrived. The Oak Creek Police Department smelled of old coffee, floor wax, and aggressive indifference. The small brick building also served as the county lockup. It was the kind of place where careers slowly died and abuses of power remained unquestioned. Bryce shoved Darius through the steel booking room door. The handcuffs remained painfully tight, reducing circulation to his hands. Move, stolen valor, Bryce ordered, pushing him toward the desk. Sergeant Nolan Gresham sat behind the high counter. Nolan was a massive former high school football player who had spent much of his adult life attempting to recreate the authority he once felt on the field. He looked up from his paperwork and examined Darius's uniform. What do we have, Bryce? He asked in a gravelly voice. Impersonating a military officer, Bryce announced proudly, slamming the wallet onto the counter. I caught him at Rusty's wearing full dress blues with medals he could never have earned. He resisted and became disrespectful. Darius remained completely still. He understood how to survive confinement. During captivity training, he had learned that the first responsibility was maintaining dignity and mental clarity. He was not being held by a hostile foreign force, but Oak Creek felt disturbingly similar. Name? Nolan asked without looking directly at him. Commander Darius Whitaker, United States Navy, Darius answered calmly. Nolan looked up with a sneer. I asked for your name, son, not the name of your fantasy character. Do you understand how insulting it is to wear that uniform? My brother served in the Gulf. You think you can dress up and pretend? Inside the wallet, you will find my common access card and driver's license, Darius replied, nodding toward the counter. They will confirm my identity and rank. Bryce grabbed the wallet before Nolan could touch it. I already examined it, Sergeant. The cards are professional quality counterfeits. He probably purchased them from the same website that sold him the medals. Bryce opened the wallet while deliberately blocking Nolan's view. He removed the military identification card. It was real. The holographic chip, the weight of the plastic, and the precise lamination left no reasonable doubt. Cold sweat moved down Bryce's back. He knew the truth, but he had already committed himself to the lie. Admitting the mistake would humiliate him before Nolan and the rest of the department. Bryce decided to continue. He quietly slipped the military identification into his own pocket and left only the Florida driver's license on the counter. See, Florida license, no military identification. Darius narrowed his eyes. He had witnessed the movement. You place my common access card inside your pocket. That card is federal property. Be quiet. Bryce turned and grabbed the lapels of Darius's dress uniform. You speak only when someone asks you a question. Remove the uniform, Nolan ordered, sounding bored. Put him in an orange jumpsuit. I do not want that fake outfit inside my holding cell. Bag it as evidence. This was the moment Darius had feared most. The uniform was not simply fabric. It carried the ribbons of campaigns where honorable men had died beside him. Having it torn away by two abusive small-town officers cut deeper than a physical injury. I will remove the uniform myself, Darius said firmly. Provide a hanger so it does not touch the floor. Nolan laughed harshly. You are not in a position to demand anything. Bryce, get the scissors. No, Darius spoke quietly, but the word carried the force of an order. He stepped back with his cuffed hands slightly raised. Remove the handcuffs, and I will comply with the booking procedure. If you cut this uniform, you will destroy government property, and I will ensure that you are held responsible. Something inside Darius's eyes stopped Bryce. It was the distant stare of a man who had faced death so often that fear no longer controlled him. Bryce hesitated. Fine, Nolan said. Remove the cuffs. If he makes one sudden movement, use the taser. Bryce unlocked them. Deep red marks surrounded Darius's wrists. He rubbed them briefly and began removing the uniform with deliberate precision. First, the jacket. He folded it carefully. Then the tie. He placed each medal on the counter as though handling a sacred object. Bryce watched, waiting for an opportunity to accuse him of another offense. When Darius stood in only his undershirt and boxer shorts, Bryce kicked the neatly arranged clothing onto the dirty floor. Oops, he said with a smile. Darius looked at the blue fabric lying across the dusty linoleum. Then he looked directly at Bryce. He did not shout. He did not attack him. He memorized his face. You have made your choice, Darius said softly. They placed him inside a holding cell at the rear of the station. It was a square concrete room containing a steel toilet and a wooden bench. The only other prisoner was a greasy-haired local man named Wade, who was unconscious in the corner after using methamphetamine. Darius sat on the bench and closed his eyes. He needed to take action. I am entitled to a telephone call, he called through the bars. Bryce walked past while swinging a set of keys. The phone is broken, Commander. Perhaps someone will repair it later. Remain where you are. Bryce walked away whistling. He felt powerful. He believed he had shown Darius who controlled the town. At his desk, Bryce removed the military identification card from his pocket and examined it. Commander, Naval Special Warfare. The lettering was crisp. What if it is genuine? A voice inside his mind asked. Bryce panicked. Nolan was inside his office. Bryce walked toward the shredder in the corner. The machine came alive with a mechanical hum. He pushed the military identification card into the blades. Plastic cracked. The security chip shattered. No identification. No proof. Now, he told himself, it would be his word against that of an unknown traveler. But Bryce had overlooked something else inside the wallet. Behind a credit card was a business card printed on heavy cream-colored paper with the gold embossed seal of the Department of Defense. A direct telephone number and a name had been handwritten across the back in blue ink. Admiral Alton Mercer. Below it was a short message. Call me at any time, son. You earned it. While Darius sat inside Oak Creek's cold jail, the world beyond the station began shouting. Eli had not posted the recording only on Instagram. He uploaded it to TikTok with a caption, Police officer arrests Navy SEAL for no reason. This is unbelievable. The algorithm quickly discovered the conflict. Views increased rapidly. When the recording reached a Stolen Valor forum in a Navy SEAL community group, the spark became a fire. Military veterans maintained close networks. They were often the first people to expose fraudulent uniforms. They examined ribbons, haircuts, insignia, and uniform fit with forensic precision. Many entered the comment section expecting to identify a fraud. Instead, confusion became recognition. Recognition became fury. A user named Frogman_88 wrote, "Wait, I know that face. That is Commander Whitaker. He commanded my platoon. That uniform is real." Another user responded, "Confirmed. He is active duty naval special warfare. That silver star came from an extraction operation in Yemen. This officer has lost his mind." The recording moved from TikTok to X. A prominent military journalist shared it with his large audience and contacted the Pentagon's Public Affairs Office. He wrote, "Oak Creek Police in Georgia appears to have arrested decorated Navy SEAL Commander Darius Whitaker for stolen valor. I have requested comment from the Navy. If this is confirmed, careers will end." The post spread immediately. Telephone lines inside the Oak Creek Police Department began ringing continuously. Dispatcher Brenda Collins had been playing solitaire. She stared at the switchboard as every line illuminated. She answered the first call, Oak Creek Police Emergency Line. "I am calling to report a kidnapping," a man said. "Your department kidnapped a United States naval officer." Brenda disconnected the call. "Prank callers," she muttered. She answered another line, "Oak Creek Police. This is unacceptable. Release Commander Whitaker." She hung up again and turned toward Nolan. "Sergeant, the phones are overwhelmed. Everyone is talking about the man Bryce arrested." Nolan frowned while eating a donut. powdered sugar covering his mustache. Ignore it. His friends are trying to frighten us. But the telephone calls continued. Emails began arriving. The station's old fax machine started screaming from the corner, producing sheet after sheet of paper. The mood inside the department changed. These were no longer random internet users. A black SUV with government plates raced south from Atlanta. Inside was Special Agent Grant Holloway of the Naval Criminal Investigative Service. Grant had been at home when his phone began receiving urgent messages. The order came from senior leadership: secure the asset, confirm his safety, prevent local officers from processing him any further. Inside the holding cell, Darius meditated. He separated himself from the anger and concentrated on his breathing. The heavy door opened. Bryce approached the bars. He appeared different. His face was pale. Sweat covered his skin. He repeatedly checked his phone. "Who are you really?" Bryce whispered. Darius opened his eyes. "I already told you, Commander Darius Whitaker." "My cousin saw the recording online," Bryce said as his confidence collapsed. "People are saying you are real. If you are actually a Navy commander, why did you not stop me? Why did you allow me to arrest you?" Darius stood and approached the bars. He towered above Bryce. "I did not allow you to do anything. You made a choice. You had every opportunity to examine my identification, and you chose to destroy it." Bryce's eyes widened. "How did you know?" "I heard the shredder," Darius answered calmly. "It has a recognizable sound. I also understand men like you. You destroy whatever frightens you." "Listen," Bryce whispered, glancing toward the doorway. "We can solve this. I can release you through the rear exit. We drop every charge, and you return to your truck. You leave town, no harm done." It was a desperate, humiliating attempt to purchase silence. "No," Darius said. "What do you mean?" "I do not want a free pass." Darius wrapped his hands around the cold steel bars. "I want justice. You humiliated me and disgraced my uniform. If you could do this to a commander in the United States Navy, I can only imagine what you have done to ordinary civilians who do not possess my rank or resources. I will remain inside the cell until my military attorney arrives." "You are making a mistake," Bryce threatened, although his voice trembled. "No one comes to Oak Creek to help people like you." "They are already coming," Darius replied. "Can you not feel it?" The rumble of engines moved through the darkness outside. The sound did not yet belong to the NCIS vehicle. It was louder. The Patriot Riders, a motorcycle organization composed of veterans, had seen the alert. Members from across Georgia responded. 15 Harley-Davidson motorcycles entered the gas station parking lot opposite the police department. They did not come to attack anyone. They came to witness. The riders positioned their motorcycles in a line with the headlights pointed toward the station. Then they crossed their arms and waited. Nolan looked through the blinds. "What is happening outside?" The telephone rang again. He grabbed it. "Oak Creek Police." "Remove me from this line." A commanding voice answered. "This is Admiral Alton Mercer of Naval Special Warfare Command. Put me in contact with the person responsible for your station." Nolan froze. The donut fell from his hand. "This is Sergeant Gresham." "Sergeant?" The Admiral's voice became ice. "You have Commander Darius Whitaker in your custody. NCIS Special Agent Grant Holloway is approaching your location. If Commander Whitaker is not released into Agent Holloway's custody, I will personally travel to Oak Creek and ensure that every federal and state resource available is used against your department. Do you understand?" Nolan swallowed. Bryce entered the room looking like a ghost. "Bryce," Nolan whispered, covering the telephone receiver. "What did you do?" "I thought he was pretending," Bryce answered weakly. "You have a United States Admiral calling this station." Nolan shouted the words. "The Admiral?" Bryce's knees weakened. He collapsed into a chair. The front entrance opened violently. A woman wearing a sharp gray suit entered with a briefcase. She moved with the confidence of a predator entering an enclosure filled with harmless animals. "Camille Prescott, attorney at law," she announced, striking her business card against the counter. "I represent Commander Whitaker. I demand immediate access to my client. I also advise both of you to stop speaking because every word you say is adding another zero to the lawsuit I am preparing." Bryce looked at Nolan. Nolan looked toward the telephone. The blue wall of silence would not protect them. Consequences were not merely arriving. They were bringing the power of the United States military and federal government with them. Darius heard the commotion from his cell. He sat back on the bench and smiled. The real confrontation was only beginning. The double doors of the Oak Creek Police Department did not merely open. They were pushed apart by a force the local officers could no longer control. Special Agent Grant Holloway did not resemble a typical police officer. He looked more like an accountant capable of killing someone with a pencil. He wore a charcoal suit more expensive than Bryce's annual salary, and an NCIS badge hung from a chain around his neck. 2 state troopers entered behind him. Their wide-brimmed hats cast shadows across their eyes. The police station that had once felt like Bryce and Nolan's private fortress had been breached. Grant walked directly toward the desk without acknowledging Nolan. He looked at Camille. Special Agent Grant Holloway, NCIS, is Commander Whitaker safe? He is inside a holding cell, Camille replied, her anger tightly controlled. They refused to give me access to him. They also claimed the booking cameras were malfunctioning. Grant looked toward Nolan with pure disappointment. Sergeant, I have a federal warrant authorizing the immediate transfer of Commander Darius Whitaker into NCIS custody. Open the cell. Nolan's throat became dry. He had spent much of his career intimidating teenagers and intoxicated drivers. Now his hands shook as he searched for the keys. We were processing him according to procedure. He was uncooperative. Open the cell, Grant repeated more softly. The lowered voice made the order far more frightening. Bryce stood near the filing cabinets, attempting to disappear into them. Nausea rose inside him as reality collapsed across his shoulders. Nolan led Grant and Camille toward the holding area. When the cell opened, Darius stood in the center. He remained dressed only in his undershirt and boxer shorts. His bare feet rested against the cold concrete. The dress uniform Bryce had kicked onto the floor remained inside the booking room. Grant stepped into the cell. He did not salute because the environment did not require it. Instead, he extended one hand. Commander, I am Special Agent Holloway. I am here to remove you from this department. Darius shook his hand firmly. You took your time, Grant. Traffic, Grant said with a rare, thin smile. Let us get you dressed. They returned to the booking area. The silence was absolute. Every officer stared at the floor, too frightened to make eye contact. Darius approached the pile containing his uniform. He lifted the jacket and brushed away the dust. Then he collected the medals. Officer Talbot. Bryce flinched. Yes? My wallet and identification. Bryce became completely still. I placed them in evidence. Retrieve them, Grant ordered. Bryce walked toward the evidence locker like a man approaching the gallows. He returned with the plastic bag and gave it to Grant. Grant opened it and removed the wallet. He inspected every compartment. Then he looked up. Where is the common access card? Where's Commander Whitaker's military identification? It was never inside the wallet, Bryce lied. The lie was fragile and transparent. He did not have one. That is false, Darius said calmly while buttoning his shirt and restoring his dignity one button at a time. I gave you the card, you put it inside your pocket. While I was inside the holding cell, I heard a cross-cut shredder operating. Everyone turned toward the shredder in the corner. The beige machine appeared harmless. Its plastic container held pieces of hidden evidence. Grant did not question Bryce. He turned toward one of the state troopers. Secure the shredder and preserve the entire contents. A federal laboratory will reconstruct everything inside. If Commander Whitaker's identification is found, Officer Talbot will face additional charges for destroying government property and obstructing justice. Bryce released a sound somewhere between a sob and a whimper. I panicked. I thought it was fake. You destroyed it, Nolan shouted, immediately turning against him. You told me there was no military identification. You told me to deal with the problem, Bryce screamed as the pressure broke through him. I never told you to destroy evidence. Gentlemen, Grant interrupted, his voice cutting through the argument. You both have the right to remain silent. I strongly recommend that you use it. The entrance opened again. A short, balding man wearing an oversized suit rushed inside, sweating heavily. It was Oak Creek Police Chief Warren Pike. He had been attending a fundraising event when the mayor contacted him. The mayor had received a call from the governor, who had been contacted by the Secretary of the Navy. What is happening? Warren demanded, attempting to reclaim control of his station. Agent Holloway, surely we can resolve this. It is a misunderstanding. Officer Talbot is a good man who made an imperfect judgment. Chief, Grant replied, moving between Warren and Darius. Your officer arrested a decorated Navy SEAL commander because he disliked the way the man looked. He assaulted him, unlawfully detained him, and destroyed federal property. News organizations are currently parking outside your station. Warren looked through the window. Police lights were being joined by the bright white lamps of television cameras. The Patriot riders revved their motorcycles. Local residents gathered with smartphones raised like torches. Darius finished tying his necktie. He put on the jacket and carefully straightened every ribbon. Commander Whitaker had returned. I am ready to leave, he said. He looked at Bryce one final time. Bryce sat with his face buried in his hands, quietly crying. Officer Talbot. Bryce raised his red, swollen eyes. You asked whether I understood what real men died defending. They died for the Constitution. They died so that officers like you could not abuse their authority against citizens like me. You disgraced your badge. Never wear it again." Darius turned and left the station with Grant and Camille beside him. Camera flashes erupted when he entered the humid Georgia night. The bikers cheered. Motorcycle engines and human voices combined into a roar. Darius did not smile or wave. He walked directly toward the waiting black SUV. He was free, but the battle for Oak Creek had only begun. Oak Creek soon became the center of national news coverage. Every major network repeated the same footage. Eli's unsteady recording from the gas station showing Bryce forcing Darius against the cruiser. The headline beneath the images read, "Hero in handcuffs, Navy SEAL arrested for stolen valor by local officer." Public outrage was powerful. Mixed with the anger of the military community, it became overwhelming. The Oak Creek Police Department removed its social media page after receiving tens of thousands of comments. The telephone system was disconnected. The mayor held a press conference on the steps of City Hall. He appeared pale before the wall of microphones. "We are conducting a complete internal investigation," he said. "Officer Talbot has been placed on paid administrative leave while the matter is reviewed." "Paid leave?" an Atlanta reporter shouted. "He destroyed federal identification. Why has he not been arrested?" "We are following department procedures," the mayor answered weakly before his staff led him away. Procedures could no longer protect them. Camille Prescott was not preparing only an unlawful arrest lawsuit. She was investigating Bryce's entire history. Her team established a public tip line. "If Officer Talbot has harassed, searched, or wrongfully arrested you, contact us." The calls arrived immediately. Darius was not the first victim. He was simply the first victim with sufficient authority and resources to fight back. A college student from Florida reported being arrested for driving under the influence despite registering no alcohol in his system. Bryce claimed he smelled marijuana, impounded the vehicle, and the cash stored inside the glove compartment disappeared. The charges were later dismissed, but the student lost his scholarship. A single mother described being stopped because of a damaged taillight. Bryce detained her beside the road for an extended period while searching her vehicle without a warrant. He threatened to contact child protection authorities unless she cooperated. There were dozens of similar stories. A clear pattern of predatory behavior emerged. Bryce targeted travelers, minorities, and people he believed could not defend themselves. He was a bully carrying a badge and protected by a system that valued institutional loyalty above justice. The FBI was now involved. Because Bryce had destroyed military identification and violated a service member's civil rights, the Department of Justice opened a parallel investigation. Federal agents did not examine only the gas station arrest. They subpoenaed years of body camera recordings, patrol car files, arrest reports, and departmental records. The corruption reached far deeper than one officer. Nolan was not simply an indifferent supervisor. He repeatedly approved Bryce's false reports and protected him from accountability. The department operated a criminal scheme. Officers seized cash from innocent travelers under civil asset forfeiture laws and used the money to increase the department's budget. Federal prosecutors eventually acted. Darius sat inside an Atlanta hotel suite watching the news. He wore jeans and a t-shirt and looked exhausted. He hated the attention. He wanted to return to his team. "Increase the volume," he told Grant, who sat nearby working on a laptop. On television, the United States Attorney for the Southern District of Georgia stood at a podium. "A federal grand jury has returned a 12-count indictment against Officer Bryce Talbot and Sergeant Nolan Gresham." The charges were staggering. Deprivation of rights under color of law, obstruction of justice for destroying military identification, falsification of federal records, kidnapping, wire fraud. The prosecutor continued. "We are also opening a consent decree investigation into the entire Oak Creek Police Department to determine whether it has engaged in a systematic pattern of unconstitutional policing." The broadcast changed to footage from Oak Creek. Federal agents were raiding the police station. Officers wearing FBI windbreakers carried boxes of records outside. Computer towers were loaded into government vehicles. Then the rear entrance opened. Bryce walked out. He no longer wore his police uniform. He wore an orange jumpsuit. His hands were cuffed behind his back, and restraints surrounded his ankles. He appeared small. The arrogance was gone. For a moment, when he saw the cameras, terror crossed his face. Nolan followed him, shouting angrily at federal agents before being pushed into the same transport vehicle. Grant closed his laptop. They denied bail. He is considered a flight risk. Bryce attempted to purchase a ticket to Cancun using his mother's credit card. Darius shook his head. "He tried to escape. He did not make it beyond airport security," Grant replied. "His name is now on the federal no-fly list." Darius stood and looked across the Atlanta skyline. He felt no joy. There was no triumph, only a solemn form of closure. "It was never only about me, Grant." No, Grant agreed. It never is. You happen to be the obstacle strong enough to expose what the machine was doing. The case was not finished. A criminal trial still waited. Bryce was cornered and desperate. He did not intend to fall without pulling others down with him. Inside his garage, he had hidden a black notebook containing the names of judges, officials, and council members who had benefited from illegal seizures. Bryce was prepared to talk. His information threatened to destroy Oak Creek's entire political structure. The federal courthouse in Savannah was built from limestone and authority. The notebook discovered in Bryce's garage exploded through the town's government like a bomb. Facing severe federal charges, he attempted to negotiate by exposing a long-running scheme in which the mayor and Chief Warren Pike targeted travelers for cash seizures. Bryce believed sacrificing more powerful people would save him. He was wrong. The trial of the United States versus Bryce Talbot began inside a courtroom filled with veterans, motorcycle riders, and active-duty Navy SEALs. They sat silently behind Commander Darius Whitaker. Assistant United States Attorney Renee Foster, known among defense attorneys as the Shark, immediately confronted Bryce with the evidence. She held up a transparent bag containing the reconstructed remains of Darius's common access card. Mr. Talbot, you claimed that you destroyed this identification because you panicked. You said you believed it was counterfeit. I did, Bryce stammered. It did not appear correct. I was frightened. Frightened? Renee raised one eyebrow. Let us hear what you actually believed. She signaled the courtroom technician. Audio from a rookie officer's body camera played through the speakers. The device had unintentionally continued recording inside the department's locker room. Bryce's voice emerged through the static. I do not care whether it is real, Sergeant. If we destroy it, the case becomes his word against ours. Who will they believe, a police officer or a black traveler passing through town? The courtroom gasped. The jurors looked toward Bryce with open disgust. The defense's claim of panic had been exposed as calculated malice. Bryce sank into his chair, realizing his own arrogance had buried him. Darius then entered the witness box. He did not speak with anger. He carried quiet, devastating dignity. Commander Whitaker, Renee asked, how did this arrest affect you? Darius looked toward the jury. I served in Afghanistan and Iraq. In those places, I understood who the enemy was. But standing inside that gas station, being handcuffed by a man who had sworn to defend the Constitution, felt like a betrayal deeper than any piece of shrapnel. His gaze moved briefly toward Bryce. If he could do that to a naval commander wearing his uniform, I could not stop thinking about what he had done to people without my rank, authority, or resources. I am here for them. The defense tried to portray Bryce as a victim of a corrupt system and an officer who had merely followed orders. The jurors rejected the argument. Their deliberations were brief. We find Bryce Talbot guilty on every charge. 12 guilty verdicts entered the record. Deprivation of rights, kidnapping, obstruction of justice, wire fraud. The final reckoning came during sentencing. Judge Everett Langston was an old-fashioned jurist with no tolerance for public corruption. Bryce stood before him and cried openly, Your Honor, please, I have a family. I made a mistake. Judge Langston looked over his glasses without sympathy. Mr. Talbot, you asked this court for mercy after giving none to your victims. You transformed the badge, a sacred symbol of public trust, into a weapon serving your ego and greed. When a police officer commits a crime, he does more than violate a statute. He fractures the foundation upon which society depends. The judge imposed separate consecutive sentences for kidnapping, deprivation of civil rights, obstruction, and racketeering. Together, they created a federal prison term spanning most of Bryce's remaining life. He would not become eligible for release until he was an elderly man. The gavel struck the bench like a gunshot. Bryce's knees collapsed. Federal marshals caught him as he began screaming. The veterans seated inside the gallery remained silent while he was taken away. Justice had moved slowly. When it arrived, it carried the force of a sledgehammer. The extraordinary sentence became national news. The message was unmistakable. A badge was intended to be a shield, not a sword. Any officer who turned it into a sword risked falling upon it. Oak Creek's collapse was complete. The mayor received a lengthy prison sentence for racketeering. Chief Warren Pike received an even longer term. Nolan accepted a reduced sentence through a plea agreement. The state of Georgia dissolved the entire Oak Creek Police Department. The county sheriff's office assumed responsibility for law enforcement and introduced body cameras, independent oversight committees, and a culture based upon transparency. Rusty's Stop and Shop became an unusual landmark. Travelers stopped not only for gasoline but also to take photographs. Eli Parker used his online attention to establish a crowdfunding campaign for a local legal aid clinic. The campaign raised hundreds of thousands of dollars within a short period. For Darius, however, the conclusion of the trial marked only the beginning of healing. Later, he returned to Oak Creek. He wore civilian clothes and drove the same black Ford F-150. Rusty's Stop and Shop had been renovated. The fuel pumps were new. The rust had disappeared. Darius entered the store. Eli was now the manager. "Commander," Eli said with a broad smile as he walked around the counter and extended his hand. "It is good to see you." "It is good to see you too, Eli." Darius smiled. "The place looks good?" "Business is strong," Eli replied. "We removed the bad energy." Darius purchased another blue sports drink, just like the one he had tried to buy during the original encounter. Outside, he stood beside his truck and looked across the road. The old brick police station had been boarded shut. A for sale sign stood on the lawn. Weeds grew through the cracks where Bryce had once marched Darius inside while he was handcuffed. Darius took a drink. For the first time in a long while, his chest felt lighter. He thought about Bryce. The former officer was imprisoned inside a high-security federal institution in Florida. Reports suggested that he was struggling. Former police officers rarely found friends inside prison, especially officers convicted of corruption. Bryce remained in protective custody, spending nearly the entire day alone inside a cell smaller than the one where he had imprisoned Darius. Consequences had not merely returned to him. They had completed their work. Darius's phone vibrated. A message from Admiral Alton Mercer appeared. "The selection board results have been released. Congratulations, Captain Whitaker." Darius stared at the screen. "Captain," the next step toward becoming an admiral. He lifted his eyes toward a clear, brilliant blue sky. The heavy humidity had disappeared. Darius returned to the truck. He had a team to lead. He had young SEALs to train. He had a country to serve. The V8 engine roared to life, drowning the remaining ghosts of Oak Creek. Darius entered Interstate 95 and merged with the traffic. Captain Darius Whitaker did not look into the rearview mirror. He looked forward. That was what heroes did. They endured the storm and continued moving. This is the powerful, true-to-life inspired story of how one corrupt officer's arrogance caused an entire corrupt system to collapse. It reminds us that ranks, badges, and titles do not create leaders. Character does. Bryce Talbot believed he was untouchable. He forgot that lies always collapse when they confront the truth. A lifetime inside federal prison provides a great deal of time to think about a blue sports drink and a bag of beef jerky. It was a fitting consequence for a man who betrayed the oath he had sworn. When this story of justice moves you, press the like button to help the channel reach more viewers. Subscribe and activate notifications for more stories about military heroes, corrupt law enforcement takedowns, and powerful consequences. Was Bryce's sentence too severe, or did he receive exactly what his actions deserved? Share your opinion in the comments. Thank you for watching. Stay safe and remember, respect is earned. It is never demanded. We will see you in the next story.